Colorado versus James Egan Holmes, case number 12 CR 1522. The record should reflect that Mr. Holmes is present with his attorneys and the prosecutors are present as well. We are outside the presence of the jury. Before I start addressing the objections that were advanced before the end of the morning session or at the end of the morning session, let me ask the defense, do you dispute the statements made by Ms. Pearson in terms of what is contained in the letters from the defendant's parents to the defendant while he was in custody after he was arrested on this case? And I know that that wasn't meant as a complete list, but she listed a bunch of subject matters with respect to each sets of letters, and I just wanted to make sure that the defense is not disputing some of those or any of those contents that she mentioned.
Your Honor, at the moment, my recall is poor. I don't recall everything that Ms. Pearson said, so it's difficult for me to address that. I do have a copy of all the letters for the court. It looks rather thick, but there are a bunch of photographs that were also sent with the letters that are a part of this packet. I'd like to submit it to the court as a court exhibit if I can know what number we're on.
Well, hold on, just a moment. Ms. Pearson, why don't you go through that list again, please?
Certainly, Your Honor.
Your Honor, the people are objecting to all of the letters in their entirety by my count, and I'm not going to claim that my math is completely accurate, but I counted 44 from Mom and 4 from Dad, that Dad writes about current football games and scores, about current soccer games, about getting his own haircut, about tax season, about what they had done at Christmas when the defendant was in jail, about the weather, about people getting the flu at work, about getting his wife's car worked on. He writes about knowing that the defendant is going to be going to Pueblo to be evaluated and what to expect and how to prepare for that. He writes about going sailing. Mom writes about what she's been doing, the book she's been reading, her book club, exercising, what's going on with the neighbors, about the weather, what she's been doing at work, going golfing with friends, all things that occurred after the date of offense. She also writes that she's educating herself about mental illness, that she thinks that she's learning to understand there are biological changes in the brain that happen, that she believes that early diagnosis and treatment is essential for mental illness, that she knows the defendant didn't choose this, that she's going to the annual conference for NAMI, the National Alliance for the Mentally Ill, that she's sorry that they didn't know he was ill. She writes that she prays for the victims, that she's sorry about this, and that she forgives the defendant, and then she recounts memories of their life together.
All right. Ms. Higgs, does the defense dispute that that the letters contain the discussions that Ms. Pearson just went through?
Some of the letters contain some of those discussions. There are a number of letters where she talks also about her daughter, our client's sister, where she talks about past family experiences. So I don't dispute that those are contained in some of them, but that is not the content of all of the letters. And
Okay, thank you. All right, let me go through my list, through the list of objections. In terms of the photographs, I haven't seen the photographs. The objection on the photographs is that some of them are cumulative, but I can't tell. So what I suggest is, as the defense moves any photographs into evidence, if the people feel that they are cumulative and inadmissible under Rule 403, they can ask to approach or they can make an objection and just say cumulative. And then if I need any discussion, we can discuss it at the bench. Otherwise, if I feel it's appropriate, I may have the defense just respond from counsel's table. But likely, if we have to have a discussion, it'll be at the bench. I haven't seen those letters. Let me just preface the rest of my comments by reminding everyone that as counsel know, the United States Supreme Court has made clear that a state court may not apply state rules of evidence in a per se or mechanistic manner so as to infringe upon a defendant's constitutional right to present mitigating evidence in a capital sentencing hearing. The Supreme Court has also been exceedingly cautious to ensure that a person found guilty of a capital offense is given every opportunity to present potentially mitigating evidence that might form the basis for a sentence less than death. So this is the standard, and I have to be cognizant of that standard as I make rulings and objections to evidence. That's the standard that I've been applying. That's the standard that I continue to apply. And it's a very difficult standard because it doesn't mean that the rules of evidence go out the window. It also doesn't necessarily mean that I apply the rules of evidence just in the exact same way that I would apply them in the trial part of the proceedings. There was an objection yesterday to holiday music in some of the defendants' family videos. And I think Ms. Pearson, during her argument, compared it to the court's ruling on the victim impact evidence. But the reality is that the law takes an almost opposite view on the two types of evidence. When it comes to mitigation evidence, the Supreme Court says, hey, we want a defendant who is facing the death penalty to have every opportunity available to introduce mitigation. On the other hand, the case law says, when it comes to victim impact evidence, trial court judge, we want you to be particularly careful. So it's almost the opposite view. We want you to be more careful than you usually would be because this has the potential to evoke strong emotions and to have the jury make decisions on an improper basis. So on the one hand, mitigation evidence, the Supreme Court wants a defendant to have as much opportunity as possible to introduce it. On the other hand, with respect to victim impact evidence, the courts want trial court judges to be as careful and vigilant as possible to avoid the risk that the jury will make a decision not based on each individual juror's reasoned moral judgment, but based on passion and emotion and some other improper basis. So let me move my way through these objections. I talked about the photographs. I'll take those one at a time, or whenever they are offered for admission, I will address them at that time. The next one has to do with the family videos, and the people yesterday said that with the exception of the 5 videos that they objected to in part, and they were only objecting to the part that had music in the background, holiday music, or to the part that involves some kind of holiday prayer. And I've addressed those objections and I've overruled those objections, and I stand by those rulings. The rest of the family videos are admitted without objection. Now, whether those videos then render some photographs cumulative, and whether they're so cumulative that I will exclude them under Rule 403 remains to be seen. That depends on what photographs are offered by the defense. The next thing I have is the certificate. It's a certificate that apparently the defendant's father received for completing coaching training. And so the question for me is, could he testify about that? Could he testify that I was very involved in my son's life, and in fact, I coached his football team or his basketball team or whatever team it was? Not only that, I went and got training for that. I think that's mitigation evidence. I think that's admissible. So I'm going to allow the certificate, and I don't know what unfair prejudice there is to the people. So the objection as to the certificate is overruled. Again, keeping in mind that this is mitigation evidence. In terms of the letters, these are letters that the defendant's parents have written the defendant in custody after this case happened. These are not admissible. And so I am sustaining the objection. this is not a close call for me. There are things in the letters that are improper, that the jury should not get to see, and Ms. Pearson went through them, and specifically I'm referring to any discussion about mental illness and what Mr. Holmes's mother may think about mental illness or about his mental illness. That's improper opinion testimony that is not admissible, and the jury should never get to hear. Even under the standard that applies to mitigation evidence. So this is one of those. Again, I mentioned earlier, my job is difficult because, as I said, what the case law says is I cannot apply the rules of evidence in a per se or mechanistic fashion. But even under that standard, these letters are, in my view, improper and inadmissible. For one thing, they were written after the fact. They were written after the defendant was charged, after the defendant, there was a possibility at least that he would face the death penalty. And some of them may have been written after the defendant pled not guilty by reason of insanity. So you have there a motive to include anything you want in those letters with the understanding that they may later be used during the case. They are self-serving. They include opinion testimony, and they include information that, in my view, is inadmissible and would affect the prosecution's right to a fair trial. And both sides have a right to a fair proceeding. It's not just the defendant. So even understanding the standard that applies to mitigation, those letters are excluded. There's one other, there's a video recording, and I don't know which of these discs it is. Let me see if I can find it. You're right, I think it is 2445, and this is the defense's number. 2445 is a video recording of the defendant's parents, apparently made for the defendant. It was made, it's my understanding that this was made after the defendant was arrested in this case. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And essentially, it's just his parents saying hello and telling him that they love him and that they're going to submit, to send letters to him. Same rationale for me. This happens after the arrest. This happens after the charges. This is self-serving. There is a motive there to have recorded this with the understanding that you would then present it in litigation. It has way too many concerns for this to be admissible. So the objection is sustained. This is irrelevant. It is hearsay, and it is inadmissible under Rule 403. Same thing with respect to the letters. Irrelevant, hearsay, and inadmissible under Rule 403 as well. So all those pieces of evidence are excluded. And then you have, I believe the last thing is 4 CDs, audio recordings by the defendant's father, just checking in with the defendant. They're very brief, each of them about 20 seconds, maybe less. And they happen apparently during a couple of months before the shooting. As I listen to them, I wonder why the defense wants them, and I wonder why the prosecution is objecting, but that's not for me to decide. I don't think they have a lot of probative value, but they do go to, they do show in some way that the defendant's father was checking in on the defendant, and so it goes to the defendant's background. It goes to the defendant's, the type of parents that the defendant has, which goes to his background. And in terms of whether this is prejudicial or not, or unfairly prejudicial, it seems to me that at least arguably this could be viewed as consistent with one of the theories the prosecution has advanced, which is that the defendant was avoiding his parents during the 2 months when he was planning the shooting, and not only avoiding his parents, but even misleading his parents. That's been a theory that the prosecution has advanced. So I think arguably this would be consistent with that. So I don't know what unfair prejudice this would have. And given that it's mitigation evidence, or it's being introduced as mitigation evidence, I will allow those 4 recordings. In terms of the letters, I want to be clear that if the defense wants to ask Mr. Holmes's parents about how they, during the time that he's been in custody, they have continued to care for him, and that they have written him letters, and how many letters they have written, you can do all that. In fact, you could pick up the stack of letters if you wish and ask about that. What I am excluding is the content of the letters. So if you want to ask about how they've continued to support him through this whole process, and how they have written letters, or how they have recorded messages for him and sent them to him, I don't have a problem with you asking that. I think that's fair. I think that's mitigation. But the content of the letters and the content of the video recording, those contents are inadmissible. Let me see if I missed anything else. That's all I have. So those are my rulings on the objections that Mr. Brockler raised at the end of the morning session, okay? If you want to retrieve the letters from the defendant's father and the discs that you gave me, thank you.
Thank you. Judge, if I can. Your Honor, what I'm going to do is mark the stack of letters from Mrs. Holmes to James Holmes as C-TR-110. I'll mark the letters from Mr. Robert Holmes to James Holmes as C-TR-111. And I will mark the video message from Bob and Arlene Holmes to James Holmes, which was our number 2445 that we've been referring to it as. It is now C-TR-112.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything else before I bring the jury in?
Your Honor, we made a corrected disc of Mr. Kerr's testimony that I have marked as D-TR-288A, and we have queued up to play just the last portion past where it skipped back.
Okay, great, thank you. So we'll start with that, and then if you want to publish the exhibits that were admitted during his testimony, I can let you do that at the end of the recording.
Thank you.
Mr. Brockler, are you ready for the jury?
Yes.
Okay. Is the defense ready, Ms. Brady?
Yes, sir.
All right, let's bring the jury in, please. By the way, before we bring the jury in, one additional record or explanation I wanted to give you. There were a couple of objections during the morning session to questions about, do you still care about do you care about the Holmes' family and the defendant, and do you support the family and the defendant? I overruled the objections because those questions have been asked repeatedly for the last couple of days of multiple witnesses without objection from the people. So to all of a sudden object didn't make any sense to me. To me, either you object to that evidence or you don't, and you can't object to it with respect to a couple of witnesses after you haven't objected to it with respect to about 20 witnesses. So that was my rationale in overruling the objection. Please be seated, everyone. The record should reflect that the jury's back in the courtroom. Welcome back, folks. I hope you had a good lunch. The four of you who are sick in the top, are you hanging in there doing okay? Yes, okay, they're all saying yeah. Oh, one of them is having her thumbs up, but she's the one who made everybody sick. Okay. Right. You might not want to show such enthusiasm at this time. All right, folks, you'll remember that at the end of the morning session, the defense was playing a recording of testimony that was done as a result of scheduling conflicts. And I told you at that time that you are to treat that testimony the same way you would treat live testimony. Do you remember all that? Okay, and everyone's saying yes and not in their head yes. There was a technical issue, and so the recording had to be stopped just before the end of it. And so at this time, I'm going to allow the defense to play the last part of it, and then we'll proceed from there. Ms. Hicks?
And Your Honor, I'd just like to make clear that we cut out the bench conferences because the nature of that static doubled over the microphone was absolutely untenable.
Yes.
So,
It's not that I got fast all of a sudden in my bench conferences. We cut out some parts of it, all right? As impressed as you might have been, I want to caution you that we did that to save some time. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, Your Honor, may we approach?
Yes? Ms. Hicks?
Laura Bloom Sweeney, is she also in that class photo?
Yes, she is.
Okay. Next to you?
Yes.
All right. And is she still the principal there at the school?
No, she's not.
But she was for many years.
Yes.
Do you think that the kid you knew as Jimmy, Mr. Holmes, was a positive influence on your fifth grade class?
Totally.
On all of those students?
Yes.
On you?
Yes.
Thank you.
Any cross-examination? Ms. Pearson?
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Carr, my name is Karen Pearson. I'm one of the prosecutors on this case. Mr. Carr, you indicated that you had to be reminded from other students about the defendant. Is that correct?
Yeah, I didn't have to be reminded. They brought it up. So they brought their calls to me. Yes.
Are some of your recollections based on them remembering things and you adopting those things?
Adopting? No, they would bring it up in a discussion. And in fact, I said, how can you guys remember that stuff? And they said, Mr. Carr.
I ask you not to say what other people said to you. Now, you haven't seen the defendant since he finished your fifth grade class in 1999, correct?
Correct.
And you were asked to identify him in the courtroom today. Would it be fair to say the only reason you can identify him is based on photographs that you've seen of him in the news?
He looks pretty much the same.
The same as he looked in fifth grade?
Yeah.
And you didn't know him before he was in the fifth grade, correct?
I saw him at school.
He was in your school for several years?
Yes.
But once he finished fifth grade, he went to a different school?
Correct.
And then you never saw him again, is that correct?
Correct.
So you don't know what kind of person he became in junior high, correct?
Correct.
Or in high school?
Correct.
Or in college?
Correct.
Or in graduate school?
All of those.
Or what kind of an adult he became?
Yes.
Thank you.
Is there any redirect, Ms. Hicks?
No, sir.
All right, sir. Thank you. May he be released from his subpoena, Ms. Hicks?
Yes, he may, Your Honor.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
All right. You're free to go.
Thanks. Sorry for overtalking.
All right, thank you. That's okay. That concludes the video tape testimony of Mr. Carr. Okay, the record should reflect that we just finished playing the video recorded testimony that is D-TR-288A. Ms. Hicks?
and Your Honor, if we could just briefly publish the exhibits that he discussed in his testimony.
Yes, you may. How do you want to do that?
I'll just call them out in order.
Okay.
Yep. D-TR-98 were the notes that he discussed. 2568. D-TR-99, which is 964, is the class picture. And D-TR-100 was his grade report. That's 2609. Thank you.
All right, call your next witness, please. Good afternoon. Do you solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of law that the testimony you are about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Please be seated. Please tell us your full name,
My full name is Robert Milton Holmes, Jr.
and could you spell all your names, please?
Yes, Roberts, R-O-B-E-R-T, Milton, M-I-L-T-O-N, Holmes, H-O-L-M-E-S, Jr., J-R, period.
Ms. Brady, you may proceed.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Yep,
Is James Holmes your son?
yes, he is.
Have you been here throughout this trial?
Yes, I have,
Almost every single day?
just about.
Has that been hard for you to listen to?
Yes, it's been a difficult experience.
I'm sorry, can you hold the microphone
Yep,
closer to you,
okay.
please, to make sure we can all hear you? You can actually move the microphone
Yep, okay.
so that it's right up, right by your mouth, okay? Thank you. All right, Ms. Brady?
Can you repeat that answer? It's been difficult for you?
Yes, it's been a very difficult experience.
And have you heard the experts who've testified that James has a serious mental illness?
Yes, I have.
Prior to July 20th, 2012, did you know he was mentally ill?
No, I did not.
Did you have any concerns about him?
We certainly did. I mean, we know he'd broken up with his girlfriend and he dropped out of grad school. And so we made plans to see him. I assumed he might be depressed, but that was our main concern.
Right. Prior to July 20th, 2012, had James ever confided in you the suicidal or homicidal thoughts that he was having?
Nope, he's never expressed anything like that.
Didn't have any idea he was having these disturbing images in his head?
No, I had no idea he was having intrusive thoughts, disturbing thoughts, or anything like that.
Right. Do you still love him?
Yes, I do.
Why?
Well, he's my son, and we always got along pretty well, and he was actually really an excellent kid.
Let's talk for a bit about you, Mr. Holmes. Where were you born, and where did you grow up?
I was born in Istanbul, Turkey. My dad was stationed there. I was an Army brat, and so until about middle school, we moved basically every year. And so spent several years. My brother was born in D.C., and spent kindergarten in Germany, where my brother got cancer, and then then we wound up back in D.C. And then eventually, after my dad retired, after 20 years, we settled where my mom grew up, which is Monterey.
That's Monterey, California?
Yes, that's correct.
Right. Do you have brothers and sisters?
Yes, I have a twin sister, Betty, who was also born in Istanbul, and then an older brother, James Holmes, who was born in D.C. He's about a year and a half older.
Okay. And, Your Honor, if I could approach with D-TR-290.
You may.
Mr. Holmes, do you recognize the photograph in 290?
Yes, I do.
And what is that?
That's a picture of my parents and our family.
Your parents and your brother and your
Yeah,
sister?
yes.
If I give you a pen, would you mind writing their names just above who's who on that photograph?
I'm sure.
Is there a pen up there or no?
There's a bunch of Sharpies over here. So, okay. So just write everybody's name out.
Yeah, and if you could, let's do it this way, like if you put Betty and then underneath maybe you can put Aunt, like what relation
Oh,
they
what
are
relationship to
to
Jimmy?
James,
Okay,
yes.
okay. Okay.
Your Honor, I'd move to admit D-TR-290.
Mr. Brockler, do you have any objection?
None, sir.
All right, without objection, it is admitted and it may be published.
We can publish that, please? And Mr. Holmes, when it comes up, if you could just start at the left as you face the picture and tell us who the people are in the picture.
Sure. From the left is my twin sister, Betty, and then his arm around her is my dad, Robert Sr. Then in the center is my brother, James, and next to him is my mom, Jane, and then I'm on the right-hand side.
So that's you on the far
The
right?
right-hand side, yeah.
Okay. Approximately how old were you in that picture, do you think?
I was probably 17, 18, maybe 16, something, so probably 16, I would say.
And does mental illness run in your family?
Yes, I guess, based on what I've heard, certainly at the trial, and what the investigators have discovered, yes.
Did you know much about the mental illness in your family prior to July 20th of 2012?
Not really too much. Our family actually never talked about it. I knew my sister, for example, had some kind of nervous breakdown when she was 19, and then she had, I guess, gone back to school and work, and then had a subsequent breakdown somewhat later. But I actually never even knew her diagnosis until actually I saw it here in court.
And what about your father?
My dad, I knew had some issues late in life, just before he died, and he had apparently had some. I wasn't sure. I thought they were like obsessive compulsive things, and he had spent some time in the community hospital of Monterey Peninsula psychiatric unit. But my mom generally handled most of that, and she never told us much about it.
And was your family the kind of family that just no one talked about it, or how is it that you wouldn't know what sort of mental illness was in your
Well, with my
twin
sister, I kind of suspected it was some variety of schizophrenia, but my mom really didn't want to talk about it. And so I don't really know the reasons for that, but in general, it wasn't really something we talked about, what everybody was.
What about Betty? Did she talk about it?
Not too much. She just told me she has a mental illness, and so that was kind of, and she's been on disability for a number of years now, and so but she functions okay with support, so.
And where do Betty and your brother Jim, where do they live?
My brother's currently in my parents' house in Carmel, and then my sister, she lives somewhat north of there, Santa Cruz, which is at the north end of Monterey Bay.
And your parents?
My parents are both deceased.
We can take that picture down, thank you. Mr. Holmes, was your family, and I'm talking about your parents and your brother and your sister and you, was that family, did you guys talk a lot about your emotions or feelings?
No, I think, I'm sort of similar to my dad. I think we're, scientific. I don't know. We weren't very emotional people. So.
How do you describe yourself socially? How do you do interacting with other people?
Yeah, I'm probably fairly socially awkward. I would say I'm certainly not an extrovert. I took a Myers-Briggs personality inventory at my company that I worked with, and it said I was highly introverted and non-judgmental. So.
Are you the kind who's the center of attention, or
No, definitely not.
do you like speaking to large groups of people?
Definitely not. So.
Are you an emotional person? Do you easily show your emotions?
No, I wouldn't say that.
Is it often the case that you're feeling something inside, but if someone looked at you, they may have no idea how you're feeling?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's hard for me to figure how I really look to other people. I sort of feel nervous, but I don't know if I look nervous. So.
Okay. Can you tell us where you went to college?
Yeah, let's see. Undergrad, I went to Stanford in math, and then after I graduated from there, I went to UCLA in math, and then sort of like Jimmy, I guess a math career didn't work out because I couldn't get financial aid or financial support. So I switched over to biostatistics, and so I stayed in biostatistics for about a year and a half additionally at UCLA, and then decided I wanted to do more theoretical statistics, so I switched to Berkeley and graduated from there.
So did you get a degree at Stanford?
Yeah, I got a bachelor's of science at Stanford.
And then what did you get any sort of degree from UCLA?
Yeah, I got 2 masters. So.
And I think you said math and biostatistics?
Yeah, math and biostat.
And then did you get any sort of degree from Berkeley?
PhD from Berkeley.
PhD in what sort of field?
Statistics.
Okay. Are you currently working?
No, I retired in January of 2014.
Where did you work prior to your retirement?
I don't know if I should mention the company yet, but anyway, I worked for a financial services company. We did credit card fraud detection for a lot of the time I worked there. I was in charge of a small team that did international fraud detection models.
So does that involve like statistic type
Yeah,
stuff?
yeah, you look at basically everybody who uses a credit card and their transaction behavior, and you try to model it and predict whether it's going to be a fraudulent transaction or not. And if it's fraudulent, you usually call the person and ask them if they made that transaction.
Okay. How long had you worked there doing that kind of work?
I think it was 12 or 13 years. I started in 2000 and ended January of 2014.
And what city and state was that in?
Yeah, it was in San Diego.
All right. Why did you retire when you did?
Well, I went back to work after the event, the shooting, and I worked for a while, but I realized I was sort of not really that engaged in work anymore, and it just didn't seem very important, and I didn't feel like I was didn't feel like I was really wanted to continue doing that, so I just, and the Christmas break seemed like a good time to just tell them I wasn't coming back for the next year.
Okay, so you've been retired for about a year and a half?
Yeah, a year and a half now.
Okay.
Plus the trial was supposed to be starting at some point, so it's been delayed. So.
Are you married?
Yes.
And who's your wife?
Arlene?
And has she been here for the trial also?
Yeah, definitely.
Can you tell us when and where you met Arlene?
We met at Berkeley. I was a grad student. She was an undergrad. And so we met playing tennis, actually, tennis class. So.
When did you get married?
We got married in 1985. I think we met around 1980 and got married in about 85.
How long after getting married did Arlene get pregnant with James?
I'm not sure when she got pregnant, but anyway, Jimmy was born in December of 87, so I guess you can subtract 9 months from that. But,
A better question might have been, how long after you got married was James born? Approximately 2 years.
yeah, it was something like that.
Okay.
That's right.
And do you also have a daughter?
Yes, we have a daughter, Chris.
And was she here yesterday?
Yeah, she testified.
And then what year was she born in?
She was born in 1992, 5 years, almost 5 years to the day. They're both in December.
And 5 years difference between the two?
Yeah, exactly.
Where was James born?
James was born in La Jolla, which is actually San Diego. It's San Diego City.
And what was the date of his birth?
December 13th,
Of 87, you said?
87, that's
All
correct.
right. What was it like for you as a new father when he was born?
Well, it was good. I mean, he was actually the first kid for both grandparents. And at that time, I guess all four grandparents were still alive. And so it was a big event.
Your Honor, can I approach Mr. Holmes with D-TR-291, 292, 293, 294, 295, and 296, please?
Yes.
Mr. Holmes, if you could just flip through those and tell me if you recognize all of them.
Yes, I do.
And do they all involve photographs of James when he was a baby?
That's correct. Yes.
Your Honor, I would move for the admission of D-TR-291 through 295.
So not 296 for now.
Through 296, thank you.
All right, Mr. Brockler?
No objection, sir.
Okay, without objection, D-TR-291 through 296 are admitted and may be published.
If we can start with 291, please. Mr. Holmes, as these come onto the screen, if you could just tell the jury what we're seeing, please.
Yeah, this is our kind of birth announcement for Jimmy, and we sent it to their friends and grandparents and relatives and stuff. So so he was 7 pounds, 5 ounces, 20 inches, born at Scripps Hospital on December 13th. So.
If we can have 292, please.
Yeah, that's us shortly after we got back from the hospital. So that's just us probably days after we got back.
How were you guys doing being brand new parents of a newborn?
It was interesting. Yeah, you didn't get any sleep for the first few months anyway. So, but he also had colic. I remember that, and so he had to we had a crank swing that we'd put him in, and then drive him around in the car a lot. That seemed to put him to sleep. So, but he was other than that, he seemed to eat and do fairly well. So.
293.
Yep, that's us shortly after he was born with his. Okay.
Were you comfortable with a baby?
Yes, it was neat. I had brown hair then. Okay, so,
294, please.
Yep, it's more of the same. Just pictures of Jim as a little baby. He was pretty cute.
Can we do 296 and then 295?
Yeah, this is probably at one of his grandma's, because I know my parents came down, and I think Arlene's parents both came down when he was born, just because he was their first grandkid.
And 295, please.
Yeah, that's him a little older, because by that time he had hair it seems like he was kind of lacking in hair for quite a while, so.
Great. You can take that down. You've mentioned the grandparents. You said that all 4 grandparents were still alive when James was born.
Yes,
Was he the first grandchild for all four grandparents?
yes, he was. Yeah.
All right, and were they involved with him as he grew up until they passed away?
Yes, yes.
Your Honor, if I can approach with D-TR-297, 298, 299, 300, and 301, please.
You may. Okay.
Mr. Holmes, do you recognize all of those exhibits that I've handed to you?
Yes,
Do they all involve James and some sort of interaction with his grandparents?
yes, they do.
Your Honor, I would move for the admission of D-TR-297 through 301, and then we can talk about 302 separately.
302 or 392? Was it 302 that you said?
302.
Okay, great. I misheard you. All right, Mr. Brockler?
As to the offered exhibits, Your Honor, no objection.
Okay. Exhibits D-TR-297 through 302 inclusive, or through 301 inclusive are admitted without objection and may be published.
Thank you. If we can publish 297, please. What's this a picture of, Mr. Holmes?
Yeah, that's an early picture of my dad and my mom with Jimmy, so when he was first born. Because they came down probably a couple of weeks after he was born.
And 298, please.
That's my mom cradling him. I'm not sure whether he's screaming or what, but he's got his mouth open. But anyway, that's my mom and Jimmy.
All right. 299.
Okay. This one's a little bit out of time with the other one since Jim's actually quite a bit older, but this is, I guess, it's somewhere near like a Christmas. We had a christening for both Jim and Chris, and that's my mom on the left, and Arlene and I, and then my brother on my right, and then in the center is Jimmy and Chris.
All right. And so that's your mom?
Yeah,
to
she
the
came
left.
down for this, there was supposed to be a Christmas Eve, baptism, I guess, for the kids.
And did the grandparents try and come down? Did they make it to like different events that the kids had?
Yeah, they came down, and then when we moved up to Salinas, we were close to my mom. At that time, my dad had passed away, but yeah, in general, they would either come down or we would go visit them for, Christmas and Thanksgiving,
Right.
certainly almost every year.
If we could have the next one, am I on 299?
Yeah, that's kind of a group picture. This is both grandmas. I'm assuming by this time both grandfathers have passed away. And so you've got kind of,
If
as
you
we call,
go from the left and just say who everyone is.
yeah, and the left is me. Next to me is my brother. We called him Big Jimmy or Uncle Jimmy. And then in the middle there is Little Jimmy. And then he's holding his little rabbit ears over Grandma Helen. And then Chris. And then my mom is sort of hidden behind Chris's afro.
So that's Arlene's mom and
Yep.
then your mom.
Yep.
All right. If we can see 300, please. 301.
This is a trip that I think they went to Ames Research Center. It's Grandma Jane and my mom Jane and Uncle Jimmy, who are see the guy in black in the middle. My mom is right next to him, and Jimmy's just below him. They went to a space camp.
And is that something the two of those?
Yeah, my mom liked to do these, tried to schedule events with the kids where she could take them somewhere and do something interesting, so.
Would you mind taking that pen and just circling your mom and James on the exhibit that's admitted?
Sure.
Great, thank you. We can take that down. And now, the exhibit D-TR-302, that's a writing. Can you tell us what that is, please?
Yeah, this is probably an essay by Jim. When was it? It's got 98 if I read the date correctly. But he talks about where he got his first name. And it turns out we have lots of Jameses and Jimmies running around all over our family. You know, my mom's grandfather's Jimmy, certainly my brother's James. Arlene's brother, we called him Dexter, but his name was James Egan. So Jim got it. He's writing about how he got all of his names, from the family. And then I guess he'd also talked to my mom because she was into genealogy. And so my mom had traced us back. She was a DAR, colonial dame, and all this stuff. And so she had traced us back, I guess, to Charlemagne or something, right? And so she apparently told Jim about it, and Jim wrote it out in this essay.
Your Honor, I would move for the admission of 302.
Mr. Brockler?
No objection, sir.
All right, without objection, D-TR-302 is admitted. By the way, Ms. Brady, are you moving the admission again of D-TR-301 with the markings?
Yes, please.
Okay. Any objection?
No, sir.
All right.
Thank you.
It's readmitted with the markings by this witness. Go ahead, Ms. Brady.
If I can approach with D-TR-389, please.
You may.
Mr. Holmes, have you seen that before?
Yes.
And can you tell the jury what it is?
It's a DVD video. Do you want me to tell them what I think is on it?
Did you put your initials on
I
it?
did. I saw it a couple days ago.
And after you saw it, did you put your initials
Yes,
on
I
it?
did.
And so what would the DVD be of?
Yeah, it says Grandma Mary Jane haircut, and so it's Grandma giving Jimmy a haircut.
Your Honor, I would move to admit and publish D-TR-389.
Mr. Brockler?
No objection, sir.
All right. Thank you. Without objection, it is admitted and it may be published.
And, sir, this is your mom again?
Yes.
Okay.
Monday, March 29th, 1993. Here's Grandma. Let's sit up straight. If we sit up straight, it'll go real quick. There we go. Just like at the barber. You sit very well for the barber. Yeah. Here goes Grandma. Jimmy's 5 years old. I don't know how old Grandma is. Grandma's 65. Grandma's 65. She gets her Medicare now. Gosh, I haven't done one of these haircuts in about 20 years. Well, you gave Jimmy his very first haircut. Did I really? Oh, I remember that. And Granddaddy was there? Yeah. You cut Dad's, you cut Granddad's, and you cut Jimmy's right down the line. Oh, be darned. And you just comb to the back and split, huh? Kind of forgotten about that, you know?
The woman who we can sort of hear talking, is that Arlene?
Yeah, that's Arlene.
All right. And where was your daughter, Chris, born?
She was also born in San Diego.
Okay. Your Honor, if I can approach Mr. Holmes with D-TR-303 through 314, please.
You may.
Mr. Holmes, if I can first have you look at 303, what is that?
That looks like a map of California.
And does it indicate on that map the different places that your son James has lived in California?
Yes, it does.
Your Honor, if I could please admit D-TR-303 and publish it to the jury.
Mr. Brocker, do you have any objection?
I don't, Your Honor. May I have a moment to just speak with Miss Brady?
You may.
For that opportunity, Your Honor. Not only do I not have an objection to this, I don't have an objection to the admission of the other 30 through 314. I don't have an objection to those and to those being published through the testimony of the witness if it will help.
Great. Ms. Brady, are you moving the admission of exhibits D-TR-304 through 314?
Excluding number 307.
Okay. All right, so without objection, D-TR-303, 304, 305, 306, 308, 309, 310, 311, 312, 313, and 314 are admitted and may be published.
Thank you. If we could put up 303. Mr. Holmes, if you could start at the very bottom of that picture, see where San Diego is?
Yep.
All right, that's where your kids were born?
Yeah, both kids were born in San Diego.
And at some point, did you move to the top of the picture there?
Yes, I guess in 95. At that point, my dad had passed away, and my mom was getting some, I thought she was having some health problems. And so that was the primary reason we moved up. She was in Monterey, and so we moved from San Diego up to Salinas. And so I got a job up there.
Just so the jury knows, if we talk about Monterey or Salinas or Castroville, is that all the general area up there?
Yeah, the Monterey Bay is this indentation with Monterey at the bottom, Santa Cruz at the top, and Castroville, where we lived, actually Oak Hills, is kind of right in the middle.
Okay. And then there's a third square on that map over Riverside. Is that where James went to college?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Thank you. If we can have 304. Can you tell us what this is?
Yeah, this is probably one of our first family portraits. I guess we got them, we had them done every few years, frequently at a church or just having a photographer do them. But this is probably an early one, probably before Chris was born.
All right. If we can actually see 306, please.
Yeah, that's Jimmy with Chris when she's very young.
And how did he do as a new
He was good.
brother?
He wasn't, there was no jealousy or anything like that. So he seemed to be pretty good with her.
Did he like to hold her and play with her?
Yeah. He was reasonably affectionate. So I don't know if he looks too happy in that one, but yes, he was good with her.
Can we see 308, please?
Yep, there's Jimmy reading to Chris. So
310?
yeah, that was probably one of our first ones after Chris was born. So
And
Yeah,
I
portrait.
think you said earlier, James would have been about 5 when, or almost exactly 5 when Chris was born,
that's right.
all right? We can see 311.
Okay, that's on the left is James Egan, Uncle Dexter, and then Jimmy, and then me to the right, playing a card game.
And Uncle Dexter, is he still alive?
No, he passed away actually in August of 2012 from cancer.
We can see 313, please.
Yeah, this is when we were first in San Diego. So it's from 87 to 95 in Jimmy's life. We were living in San Diego. The street was called Prairie Dog, and it actually was only 1 block long. So that you might see some pictures later where they have a lot of events. This was a very active, lots of kids.
And
living in
that's
San Diego.
you and James,
Yeah, that's Jimmy and I playing catch.
314?
That's a picture of Jim, Arlene, and Chris.
And all of these pictures, the approximate age of these pictures that we're seeing, do those all appear to be during the time when you lived in San Diego before you moved
Yeah,
up
kind of the
north?
first time in San Diego.
Okay. Now, you started to tell us about why you moved up to the Salinas-Castroville area.
Yes.
Your mom was getting sick?
Well, she had some health problems. She had some circulatory problems, and so we thought we might be closer, because it turns out from San Diego, it's like a eight or some hour drive to get up to Monterey.
All right. And did you have to find a new job up there?
I did.
And was Arlene working during this time period?
Yeah, she's worked as a nurse. I don't know. Sometimes she had worked part-time, particularly when the kids were young, and then as they got older, she was working more full-time, basically in different nursing professions.
And approximately how old would James and Chris have been when you moved up north?
Yeah, let's see, 95, that's 7, 8. Jim would have been 7 or 8. Chris would have been 2 or 3.
Mm-hmm. And how did the family do with the move to Castroville?
That one I thought went fairly well, because they kind of went from a very active social community in San Diego. There were lots of families with kids, both kids' ages, to Salinas, where it was pretty much the same way. There were a particularly large number of kids Jim's age, and Chris didn't have too many her age, but eventually she found some friends.
And we've heard from some neighbors from that area who described it as a very interactive, friendly place. Was that your take on the neighborhood also?
Yeah, I thought both places were very social.
And while you were living there, did your son James have friends?
Yes.
Did he go outside and play?
Yeah, in fact, most of the time.
Did he have kids over to the house?
Yep.
Did he go over to their house?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Any concerns about how he was socializing with kids his own age while you lived in that house?
At that point, he didn't seem to have many problems.
Your Honor, I'm sorry, Mr. Holmes. Your Honor, if I can approach with D-TR-315 through 328, please.
You may.
Mr. Holmes, if you can flip through that stack and tell me if they all appear to be pictures of your family's life in the Castroville, Salinas area.
You may.
Your Honor, we don't have any objection to the admission of, I think it's 315 to 328.
It is.
Thank you.
All right, Ms. Brady, you want him in, right?
Yes, please.
Okay, Without objection, then D-TR-315 through 328 inclusive are admitted and may be published.
Thank you. If we can start with 315, please. Can you tell the jury about this?
Yeah, this is, in our house in Oak Hills, we were on a cul-de-sac, and so it was this big old pie-shaped lot. But in any case, there was a side yard that really had nothing but weeds, so most of the kids, actually, not just Jim and Chris, would go out there and dig mud holes. And so this is just an example of Jim and Chris.
Can we see 316, please?
Yeah, this is more of it. You can see over the fence is the cul-de-sac's right behind the fence, and they had a basketball court there too. So, but anyway, this is another mud hole.
And at this, James would have been about how old in this picture?
Well, let's see. This looks pretty soon after they moved, so he would have been maybe 8 or 9, maybe something like that. Okay.
317, please.
Okay, this was probably, I don't know, as people in Oak Hills, they celebrated a lot of birthday parties, and I think this was one of Jimmy's. Basically, there were a lot of kids in the neighborhood, and whenever there was a birthday party, they would invite all the kids over for a birthday party. So there was almost like a birthday party every week or something going on. And so this is just a picture of one of Jim's.
Right.
And it's over at a neighbor's house.
And that's Jim sitting on that little stool there?
Yeah, that's Jim on the little hassock there.
Is that you next to him?
Yeah, that's me, trying to figure out what he got.
319, please.
Yeah, that's Jim and Chris just sitting on the couch there.
And at this age, how were Jim and Chris getting along?
Yeah, they got along pretty well. Actually, when they were first at Oak Hills, there weren't that many people Chris's age, and so Chris tended to sort of glom on to Jimmy and his friends, and he was usually pretty patient about that, although I think sometimes it stressed him, but he was actually pretty good with her.
320?
Yeah,
What's this?
Looks like I see that's probably Christmas, since I can see a little piece of a fake Christmas tree there. So that's probably us during Christmas, all wearing beanies. I'm not quite sure what the reason is for that, but.
321?
And let's see, yeah, Jim's wearing his Lakers jersey. He liked that. And so. Yes, a Halloween picture. That's Jim and Chris at Halloween, which was a big event. I don't know if Arlene will talk more about it, but Halloween in Oak Hills was pretty big because they'd always do haunted houses, and it turned out Oak Hills was actually out in the middle of farmland. And so what would happen there is all of the people who lived out in the farming areas would bring their kids into Oak Hills to trick or treat. And so we'd have to get like 5 bags of candy from Costco to handle the crowd. But that's how I'd see a lot of the kids that Jim knew, because a lot of them lived out kind of in the boondocks there.
323?
Yeah, that's probably Thanksgiving dinner at Arlene's mom's house. She's in the middle there, and so we would typically spend Thanksgiving either at one grandma or the other, and then Christmas at the other grandma. So
324?
yeah, that's Jim and Chris at Oak Hills, just kind of sitting around, maybe.
325?
Okay. There's a whole gang. I think that was sort of a selfie or something, but I think I just barely made it back to the bed.
You think it was on a timer or something?
Yeah, just to get everybody. So that's us in Oak Hills. So.
326?
Yeah, that's probably near Christmas in Oak Hills. So, that's just in our family room, sort of.
That's at your
another
house?
selfie, probably.
328, please.
Yeah, that's definitely a Christmas picture. We brought our Christmas tree up from San Diego, and it doesn't quite fit, so we had to bend the top over. So,
And it looks like the kids are getting a little bit older in that picture?
yeah, they're getting older, and we're probably, I'm not sure why we're all dressed up. We're probably going somewhere for a Christmas party.
At this age, in the Castroville, Salinas area, you can take that picture down, thank you, and younger, was your son, James, an affectionate child?
Yeah, he was fine. I mean, he was good with Chris, like children. I mean, he, generally speaking, got along reasonably well. I wouldn't say he was never outgoing or anything, but he seemed to get along with everybody well.
All right. Your Honor, if I can approach with D-TR-329 and D-TR-390, please.
Yes.
Your Honor, I've seen both of these. Thank you, Ms. Brady. No objection to them being admitted.
All right, without objection, Ms. Brady, I'm assuming you're moving their admission?
Yes, sir.
All right, without objection, D-TR-329 and 390 are admitted and may be published.
If we can publish 390, please. What was that screaming?
Oh, that was a bunch of kids screaming. And so that was like at kindergarten, I think. And anyway, so that was Jim running up and jumping up.
And he hugged you. Did he, would he hug you and Arlene and his sister?
Yeah, he was pretty affectionate. So.
All right. And can you tell the jury about the next exhibit? What's I didn't write down the number.
329.
329?
TR-329.
329, you're right. Can you tell the jury what 329 is,
Yeah,
please?
it's a Valentine's card from Jimmy to me.
Right, and approximately how old do you think he was when he wrote that to you?
This one looks like he's pretty young, but
Based on the handwriting and the illustration?
okay, yeah, let me see here. Yeah, I'm not quite sure what date it is, I'm sorry, okay.
All right. Was there a time where you had to move back to the San Diego area?
Yes. We stayed up in Oak Hills for 5 years, almost. And then at the time, my mom was actually doing much better. And my brother and sister were still up there. So I think we decided as a family it would be best to move back down. So.
And did you again have to get a new job?
Yeah, I got a new job. I didn't move until I got the job.
And that was at the job you then stayed at until you retired?
Yeah, that's a financial services company.
Right, and what grade in school was James when you moved from Northern California down to the San Diego area?
Yeah, Jim had almost completed, I think, 6th grade at Gambetta Middle School. At that point, 6th grade was part of middle school, not junior high. So he had almost completed it, and so we moved in May of 2000. And then actually, I think he spent the last couple weeks. I thought it'd be a great idea if he would see the new school before summer started. So So we moved him back for the last couple of weeks of school down to San Diego and Mesa Verde Middle School.
And Chris would have been about 5 years younger,
Yeah, she was still in elementary school.
right? How did the family do with this move back to San Diego?
I know Jim didn't like this moving early, so he was pretty unhappy about that. But in general, I thought it actually, we moved to sort of a completely different environment. The street we moved on in San Diego, essentially most of the kids were grown, and there was not much in the way of sort of social stuff on our street. And I think it started where Jim started to have a tough time socializing.
All right. Did the family at some point decide to go see a counselor?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm not quite sure how, it was a ways after we moved there. We went to see this counselor, Mel Lipsy, which we've been testified about. And we saw him a number of times, he was sort of a family counselor. And so we were concerned. Chris seemed to be making friends and fitting in, but Jim was having a little more trouble. And he seemed to be, much more isolated than he had ever been before.
And were you and Arlene taking steps or trying to do things to get him more involved?
Yeah, I mean, he was doing some of the usual stuff because he did continue, he played soccer practically during this whole time, even when we lived in San Diego, all the way through Salinas and then all the way back. He played soccer essentially every year and was always involved in that. So he had his sports and he was always doing well at school. So in particular, I wasn't super worried about him at that time, but I thought it's better for him to have more social interaction.
So you and Arlene were hoping he would become more socially involved?
Yes.
Now the jury has probably seen on some stuff in this case, but the jury has seen Bobo. Can you tell the jury about your nickname Bobo and where that came from?
Oh, I think that was more one of Arlene's nicknames for me, and apparently Arlene's nickname was Goo from her family, right? That's what her brothers all called her, and so I think that's where Jimmy got Goober, right? So he made just his own variation on our nicknames.
Mm-hmm. I assume he usually called you Mom and Dad when he was younger.
Yes, I think so. I don't think it was usually in emails that he used Bobo or Goober.
Those nicknames?
Yeah, I don't think he called us that in person.
What middle school did James go to once you guys got back to San Diego?
Yeah, that'd be Mesa Verde Middle School.
And then what high school?
Westview High School.
During that time, middle school and high school, did James seem to have a lot of friends?
No.
How was he socially compared to when you lived up near Salinas? How was he during these years back in San Diego?
Yeah, and in the first time in San Diego and up in Oak Hills, he always had this group of kids he would sort of run with and hang around, and he didn't have that, at least not that I knew of, because I don't think I ever saw, Earl or Richie. I knew at some point he had a couple friends, but I actually never saw them.
So if
That was unusual.
did you hear those young men testify about how they were some of James's closest friends?
Yes.
Had you ever met them?
I'd never met either of them.
Had they ever, when you were there, had they ever been over to your house?
No.
Did James bring any other kids over to the house?
A couple of times he might have had a kid over. When he was first there, there was one or two kids who lived down the block that I think Arlene knew their mom and arranged for them to come over, and they played video games a little bit, but they didn't seem to hit it off. So.
And compared to how it was
Yeah.
in Oak Hills?
Yeah, it was quite different.
Okay, less socialization?
Much less.
Your Honor, if I can approach Mr. Holmes with D-TR-330 through 335, please.
Yes.
Your Honor, I've had the opportunity to review 330 through 335. Thank you, Ms. Brady, and I have no objection to its admission.
Okay, without objection, D-TR-330 through 335 are admitted and may be published.
Thank you. If we can show 330, please. Mr. Holmes, does this seem to be a picture in the time frame we're talking about, middle school to high school?
Yes, it is. Jim's probably in high school. Chris may well be in middle school, and it's a church photo of the family.
331?
Yep, pretty much the same age ranges. We're all just sitting around in our living room in San Diego.
And that's at your house?
Yes.
Let's do
Might be
330.
another one around Christmas if I can see the presents on the edge there.
Let's do 333, please.
Yep. This is a little bit older. Jim's high school, and Chris looks like she's getting older too, so.
And where is this picture?
Gosh, this one I can never.
Look at the one on the screen, Mr. Holmes. Is that the one
Oh,
you're
that
looking
one.
at?
Oh, okay. Oh, that one, sure. Okay, I'm sorry, I was looking at the wrong picture. This one is actually at my sister for several years stayed at a place which offered both room and board. And so during that time, we would have Thanksgiving every year. The reason we did Thanksgiving in Monterey is that was my sister and my birthday. It was right around Thanksgiving. So we'd tend to get together. I'd always see my sister on Thanksgiving. And so that's her in this, La Posada is the name of the place, but it's a place where we had Thanksgiving dinner with the whole family.
And is that Betty there in the dark pink T-shirt?
Yeah, you see Betty here with the pink one with the swoosh, and you got Jimmy to the left, my mom, I think that's my mom hidden behind them, and then Chrissy to the center. Then you can see the left half of my brother's head, so.
334, please.
Yeah, after my sister subsequently moved out of this place, which had both room and board, and then she moved to just an apartment. And so after that, we went to this Italian restaurant for Thanksgiving. And so that's my brother and Jimmy having Thanksgiving dinner.
335.
Yeah. This we did for both Chris and Jim, where you have a sort of, every year you get their photograph out of their yearbook. And so this is through kindergarten through senior.
All right. We can take that down. During high school, how did James do academically in high school?
As far as, I think he'd always done well academically.
And what did he do for fun or for pastime during high school?
Aside from sort of sports, he was always doing soccer, and he was always, he'd sometimes do paintball with his friends or video games. That seemed to be his main activity.
Did he like video games?
Yes, he'd always played strategy type video games and World of Warcraft. And I didn't know that much about him other than he played those from a very young age.
How was his relationship with you during high school?
It was fine. I mean, I was working most of the time, and he was going to school. And so we'd always have dinner together, but I think our relationship was fine.
How was his relationship with his mother?
I think it was actually okay. I mean, I didn't see too many problems. She was probably the main disciplinarian in the family, so.
And by disciplinarian, what did that look like in your home?
Well, just setting limits, for example, limits on video games, limits on everything. But Jim didn't. He'd always been, he never required much in the way of limits in terms of staying out late or, personal behavior, other than video games and making sure he did his chores. He was pretty easy to deal with.
How about the relationship with his sister, Chris?
It was fine. I mean, they probably taunted each other a little. I think Chris When she was very little, she sort of hung on to him, at Oak Hills. And then as she had her own friends, they kind of, I guess they drifted apart just sort of, I guess, the way I would have expected, right? She had her circle of friends, he had his friends. They basically had different activities. And so I'd say they probably weren't as close as they were.
Did you see anything that you wouldn't expect to see between a brother and sister during sort of teenage years?
No, I heard all this, there's been this testimony about Jim slugging Chris or something, and I don't remember that incident, and it's probably more that Jimmy remembered it or something, but they weren't combative, little if at all. I mean, I'm sure they got into some fights, but I don't think there was any big fights, and there wasn't violence or anything like that.
Okay. Your Honor, if I can approach with D-TR-336 and 337, please.
Yes.
Sure, I've had the opportunity to look at 336. I don't know how many pages it is. It feels like maybe 10,000, but I don't object to its admission or publication, Your Honor.
All right, it is admitted without objection.
Same position on 337, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right, thank you. That too is admitted without objection. Thank you.
Mr. Holmes, if you look at 336, does that appear to be a packet with all soccer-related pictures and documents?
Yes, it is.
And do those accurately show how many teams James played for soccer and him with the team members?
Yes.
And have you circled him in those group photos so that the jury can see him?
Yes, I have.
Your Honor, if I can just publish just the first page of 336, please.
Yes, and the markings were made before the admission of the exhibits, right?
That is correct.
Okay, great.
Is that top individual picture, is that James when he was younger, when he played soccer?
Yes.
And then a group picture, and when the jury sees it on the actual exhibit, that's where you've circled him on there. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And then after that first page, there are a number of pages like this from different age groups.
Right. That's
Okay.
right.
And if we can go to first page of 337, please. Mr. Holmes, on 337, does that appear to be a packet of pictures of James when he would play basketball?
Yes, it is.
All right. And is this the first picture of that packet?
Yes, it is.
Okay. What do you think his favorite sport was?
I think his favorite sport was soccer, but I think he liked basketball. So definitely
Honor?
soccer.
Excuse me, sir. If I can approach Mr. Holmes with D-TR-338 and 339, please.
You may.
Had the opportunity to look at 338 and 339. I have no objection to their admission or publication.
All right, thank you. D-TR-338 and 339 are admitted without objection, and they may be published.
We can publish 338, please. Mr. Holmes, what is this?
Yeah, this is a picture of Jimmy when we first lived in San Diego. I think he's in a karate outfit. He took karate for a year or two.
Right, and 339, what's that packet?
Yeah, that's a whole packet of all of his taekwondo, I guess is the technical name of it, his taekwondo classes that he took, and all the belts and things that he earned. I guess you earn stripes and badges and belts, different colored belts, the further you get along in karate.
Do you know how he got involved in karate? How did he end up doing that?
I'm not sure. Arlene might know better. I just thought we knew somebody had a karate studio in our neighborhood, and somehow, I'm not quite sure how he got involved, but we took him over and he seemed to enjoy it.
We can take that down. If I can approach with D-TR-391.
Your Honor, I've had the opportunity to confirm what's on 391. I have no objection.
All right, without objection, D-TR-391 is admitted and may be published.
We can show 391, please.
Okay. And here comes a goal being fired in by Jimmy Holmes. 1, 2, 3.
Okay. I need my goalie gloves.
All right, it worked that time.
There you go.
Mr. Holmes, what did we just see there?
You saw a couple pictures of Jim kicking a soccer ball in our cul-de-sac and shooting some basketballs in the cul-de-sac. So,
Are those just clips from home
yeah, and then there was
films?
one little one of a soccer game there that he was a player.
Okay, and are those things that you and Arlene, types of things you and Arlene would videotape when the kids were growing up?
Yeah, when Jimmy was really young, we did a lot of videotaping. It sort of dwindled over the years, but
I missed that last part, I'm sorry.
yeah, when Jimmy was young, we did a lot of videotaping, but it kind of dwindled over the years.
As you get busy.
Yeah.
Did you, as a family, like to go out and do different things as a family?
Yes.
What sort of things did you like to do?
Well, I guess in addition to the sort of family functions, which we do every Thanksgiving and Christmas, we tried to have at least one camping trip in the summer and one kind of ski trip in the winter where we'd go to, usually more recently we'd go to Big Bear, California, which was mountains close by to San Diego and LA.
Your Honor, if I can approach Mr. Holmes with D-TR-340 through 355, except for 351.
Yes. Yes. Actually, why don't we take our afternoon break? Members of the jury, it's 10 after 3. Let's go ahead and take our afternoon break. Please make sure you follow all my advisements during the break. Enjoy the break, and I'll see you back here in 20 minutes, okay? Thank you. Please be seated, everyone. The record should reflect that the jury has exited the courtroom now. Mr. Brockler? Step down and go on break? Yes, you may, sir. Thank you.
Your Honor, I've looked at 340 through 355. There are two. 341 and 342 that seem to be still shots of a video that I confirmed with Ms. Brady they're going to seek to admit separately, and I would argue that those are cumulative. Otherwise, I have no objection to the others.
All right. Any response, Ms. Brady?
We have just a less than 10-second clip of Mr. Holmes, 20 seconds maybe, playing with his son in the ocean. One is of James and the board, and the other one is his dad with the boogie board. I don't think it's necessarily cumulative. We'll show the very short clip, publish the pictures, but they'll go back. Should be the problem.
Can I see the pictures, please?
I can show the court the clip. The court would like to see that.
Yes, please.
Your Honor, as I sit here and think about this, and of course I still believe I'm technically right, I want to withdraw my objection, and let's just move on with all this stuff.
Okay, great. All right, thank you. Based on Mr. Brockler withdrawing his objection, then I don't have to address it. So enjoy the break, and I'll see you back here after the break in about 20 minutes. Thank you.